Hey, Mike with No Problems Gaming here, and today's video will be covering 20 games worth buying in the new GameStop early Black Friday sale, so let's get into it. Now, a couple things before we jump into the video. When you see the prices on these games, some of those are the pre-owned version prices, some of them are new, so if you see a game that you like, definitely check out on their website to see if it's a pre-owned or new version. On top of that, I'll be showing different system types, so it might be an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Switch. If you see a game that you like and it's not the system that you own, again, definitely check for it on their site because a lot of these games are on sale for every single platform. The pricing just might be a little bit different on them. On top of that, there's a couple hundred pages of games on sale, but these 20 games are ones that I enjoy and thought look great, so if there's ones that I missed, let me know in the comments below. But with that said, let's jump into the video. Alright, so the first game on the list is the Cowabunga Collection. Now this is an awesome beat 'em up collection of some of the best Ninja Turtle beat 'em up games ever, and some other installments in the Ninja Turtle series as well. So you'll get the first three that came out on NES, you'll get Turtles in Time, you'll get the Sega version of that. There's several Game Boy games in the Turtles series as well, plus some of the arcade versions of the Turtles series. And so if you like classic beat 'em ups, these are some of my favorites of all time. And if you haven't played any of these yet, or maybe played some or want to revisit them on modern consoles, this is a great chance to do it. They've made a lot of enhancements to the game as well, so you can eliminate things like screen flickering or slowdown that was a common thing in the early NES titles. So if you want to experience these games in some of the best versions possible, I definitely recommend checking out the Cowabunga Collection. Alright, the next game on the list is Dragon Quest XI, the Definitive Edition. I've talked about Dragon Quest XI a lot on the channel. It's one of my favorite Dragon Quest games in the series, and this is the definitive version of the game as well. I know I sunk hundreds of hours into this game. The storyline is really intriguing. There's a huge backstory within the game, and a ton of great characters to fall in love with. The gameplay is incredibly addicting. There's massive amounts of side quests within the game, and there's a Draconian mode that you can increase the difficulty, adding more hours to the already massive game. Again, I think it's one of the best storylines in the Dragon Quest series, so if you haven't played Dragon Quest XI yet, I definitely recommend checking it out. Alright, the next game on the list is the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. And so this is actually a remaster of the 3 original Spyro games brought to modern consoles. And so if you like 3D action platforming games, the Spyro series are some of the best. You'll play as a young dragon Spyro and go on many adventures to save his land. And so again, it plays similar to games like Mario 64 or Donkey Kong 64, Crash Bandicoot, and other great 3D action platformers. Plus, as I mentioned, this is a remastered edition. So the controls are awesome, the graphics look great, and it plays incredibly well on modern consoles. So if you're looking for a new 3D action platforming game, definitely pick up the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Alright, the next game on the list is Monster Hunter Rise. So if you're not familiar with the Monster Hunter series, in the game you'll play as a hunter that goes on quests to defeat huge monsters. And so the game is an action RPG that gets incredibly complex. I'll definitely say the learning curve is a bit steep in these type of games, so if you're new to the Monster Hunter series, be prepared for that. And it's not like a typical RPG where many of the enemies are quickly defeated. In this case, you're going to be going up against massive monsters, and so you'll really need to prep beforehand if you hope to take out these monsters. Battles can take a long time, and it's kind of an endurance battle in many cases, and so you'll really need to prep for these battles in the sense of getting the right equipment, getting your armor, crafting the right weapons, and having a handful of items that can assist you in the hunt. The gameplay is super addicting and it's a lot of fun, so whether you're a Monster Hunter veteran or new to the series, I definitely recommend checking out Monster Hunter Rise. Alright, the next game on the list is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and this is the remastered version on Nintendo Switch. Now, if you're not familiar with Link's Awakening, it was originally on the Game Boy, and is one of the first Game Boy games I ever played, and to me it still holds up as one of the best Zelda games in the series. And so at the beginning of the game, you're stranded on an island and you go on a quest finding magical instruments to wake the windfish. And so it sounds a little trippy, and it kind of is, but the gameplay is top notch. And so you'll explore this massive world in a classic Legend of Zelda style. So you'll go through top-down dungeon crawling, but also the gameplay will switch between side-scrolling action in some of the dungeon areas as well. It introduces a lot of the classic items from the Legend of Zelda series. The gameplay is a ton of fun, the bosses are challenging, and if you haven't played the original on Game Boy, or maybe you want to try this remastered version, either way I definitely recommend it. Alright, so the next game on the list is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. And so this is a remastered edition of the original original games. I know growing up, these were some of the biggest games out there, and they were super addicting and a lot of fun. You'll travel across many different locations, performing unique tricks with your skateboarders, and there's a ton of unlockable characters you can play as well. There's different challenge modes, you can play local co-op against each other. And if you've never played the Tony Hawk series or fans of the series when it originally came out and want to play the best version out there, I definitely recommend checking out this remastered edition of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. Alright, the next game on the list is Dying Light 2: Stay Human. So this is a sequel to the original Dying Light game, one of my favorite zombie games ever, and it takes place several years after the events of the first game. And zombies have basically taken over the world at this point, and there's very few remaining settlements, and you'll be tossed into a new city. And so like the first game, it's more of an action RPG, but many of the great elements from the first game remain in this game, and they've enhanced it even further. So one of the big draws for me in this game was the parkour abilities that your character unlocks. So as you explore the city, you'll be diving over cars, jumping off rooftops, and scaling buildings with your parkour abilities, and they'll enhance and get even better over time. The game focuses a lot more on melee combat in this one versus the original game where you did have the ability to get guns, but in this game you'll just be using melee weapons, and so the combat is even more intense. And it also has that day-night cycle that the original game had, where the daylight hours are a little bit more tame, but when it gets to the nighttime hours, things get really intense. It has an interesting story, addictive gameplay, and a lot of great RPG level-up mechanics throughout the game. So if you like zombie games and action RPGs, I definitely recommend checking it out. Alright, the next game on the list is another zombie game, World War Z Aftermath. And so this is kind of the ultimate edition of World War Z, also another one of my favorite zombie games. But this time you get all the original content of the base game, plus all the bonus expansions and DLC to the game. And so this is more of a third-person shooter zombie game, where you'll fight waves and waves of zombies, trying to get your team of survivors to safety. On top of that, there's also a lot of RPG elements to the game. So as you play through the game, you'll have different classes that you can choose from for your characters, giving them unique abilities and upgrade powers. You'll be able to upgrade guns as you play. And as you complete different missions as the different characters, you'll unlock more of their backstory. But really, the intensity of the zombies in this game, the addictive RPG elements, and the fun gameplay is what drew me back to the game. So if you haven't played World War Z yet, or really just want to get the ultimate version of the game, I would definitely recommend checking out World War Z Aftermath. Alright, the next game on the list is Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. Now I think a lot of people may have passed on this game because they weren't really familiar with the story, but the game itself follows kind of an alternate version of sense of the original Final Fantasy game. So you'll be revisiting a lot of the classic locations, as well as taking on the four fiends that terrorized the world in the first Final Fantasy. And so you'll play as a bunch of heroes in this action RPG that feels a lot like a Dark Souls game or an Elden Ring type game, where characters will have their different classes from the Final Fantasy series, which have their unique abilities. There's tons of weapons that you can find throughout the game. You can upgrade and craft new items as well, and there's a ton of content to the game as well. I definitely won't go into spoiler territory, but the ending of this game is one of the best in the series and really ties into the original Final Fantasy, which just happens to be one of my favorite games of all time. So if you haven't given this game a chance yet and want an awesome action RPG, I definitely recommend checking out Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. Alright, the next game on the list is Bravely Default 2. And so this is more of a traditional turn-based RPG, and even though it's Bravely Default 2, you don't actually need to play the original Bravely Default. It's its own unique storyline, and so you play as four heroes that take on the mantle of the Heroes of Light and try and protect the crystals from an ancient evil, the Night Nexus. Now it isn't a Final Fantasy game, but you do play as a lot of the classic jobs from the Final Fantasy series, like White Mages, Black Mages, Knights, Dragoons, and much more. On top of that, you can mix and match abilities from these class types to really optimize your characters to your liking. There's a ton of different side quests. The gameplay is incredibly addicting, and there's a lot of great quality of life features to this RPG as well. One of my favorites being that you can speed up time during the battles, so even if you are doing a ton of grinding in the game, it goes by pretty quickly with that extra speed boost. If you like turn-based RPGs in the Final Fantasy series, I definitely recommend checking out Bravely Default 2. Alright, the next game on the list is Tales of Arise. Now this is one of my favorite games from 2021, and it's an action RPG with a massive story arc. And so in this game you play as a band of heroes that's trying to overthrow an evil empire that has taken over the planet and has pretty much enslaved the original population. And one thing that I really enjoy about this game is the RPG combat. And so as I mentioned, it's an action RPG where you'll mainly control one character, but you can switch between each of the characters that you control. But on top of that, other characters will be mapped to different buttons on the controller, so you can unleash their abilities throughout the combat as well. There's a massive world to explore, a ton of side quests. The storyline has some crazy twists and turns as well. But if you like action RPGs, I definitely recommend checking out Tales of Arise. Alright, the next game on the list is the Resident Evil Origins Collection. Alright, so this collection includes 2 great games, the original Resident Evil game but a remastered version, as well as the remastered version of Resident Evil 0. And so if you've ever wondered what the origins of the Resident Evil series are, these 2 games reveal that storyline. On top of that, since they are the HD remastered versions, the controls are a lot easier to handle compared to the original game that came out on PlayStation and the original Resident Evil 0 that came out on GameCube. But again, these games really started the series. So you'll get the original game that's been remastered, the first Resident Evil, and then also Resident Evil 0, which is more of a prequel to the first game. It wasn't the second or first game in the series, but it is kind of behind the scenes of the original story. It does feature more of the classic Resident Evil style gameplay, which is more of a bird's eye view tank control type controls. But since the game has been enhanced and remastered, the controls aren't going to feel as clunky as maybe the original PlayStation 1 game when it first came out. So if you're a fan of survival horror games and you haven't played these Resident Evil classics, I definitely recommend checking them out. Alright, the next game on the list is another great collection, and this is the Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1 and 2. And so if you're not familiar with the Mega Man series, Mega Man is a super fighting robot that is protecting the world from evil robots that have gone maverick and are a threat to the world. And so this is actually a massive collection of several of the games in the series. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of Mega Man X 1 through 4, which is on part 1 of the collection, but I still had a lot of fun with the later games in the series. They maybe just weren't as good as the original games in the series. Now the gameplay is classic to Mega Man, but a little bit more fast-paced in the X series. So in these games, you'll choose from many different bosses that you'll take on, and you'll traverse through many action platforming stages and fight against intense bosses. And once you defeat them, you'll unlock their powers that you can then use on future bosses. And so it introduces kind of a rock, paper, scissors mechanic. But as I mentioned, the X series is a little bit more fast-paced and more intense. You'll find hidden armor upgrades for Mega Man, heart tanks to boost your health gauge, and a little bit more darker storyline compared to the original Mega Man series. So if you like action platforming games and want to play some of the best, I definitely recommend picking up this Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1 and 2. Alright, the next game on the list is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. And so this series is a spiritual successor to the Castlevania series, and was brought to life by the original team that created Castlevania. And so me being a massive fan of the Castlevania series, I definitely had to check this series out. And so this game is an action platforming RPG, and is definitely one of my favorite Metroidvania style games in recent years. It has a similar feel to Castlevania classics like Symphony of the Night, but again features the unique storyline set in the Bloodstained universe, but it still has that dark gothic feel like classic Castlevania games. If you're looking for a great Metroidvania game, I definitely recommend checking out Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Alright, the next game on the list is Rare Replay. Now this game includes 30 classic games from the publisher Rare, which were definitely some of my favorites growing up. So you'll get great classics like RC Pro-Am, Battletoads, Killer Instinct Gold, Banjo-Kazooie, Jet Force Gemini, Perfect Dark, and much more. So there's a ton of variety of games in this collection. You'll get beat-em-ups, you'll get first-person shooters, racing games, fighting games, and much more. And it spans a huge chunk of time that these games were released as well. So you'll get classic arcade games, games from the NES, some from Nintendo 64, some from Xbox 360, and much more. It's featured at a great price right now, so if any of these games stand out to you, I definitely recommend picking it up. Alright, the next game on the list is Dead Rising. Now this is another one of my favorite zombie games, and to me it feels inspired by one of my favorite zombie movies, Dawn of the Dead. And so in this game you play as Frank West, a rogue photographer that drops into Willamette Mall in the hopes of documenting the recent zombie outbreak going on in Willamette Mall and to unravel the mystery of how this all came to be. And so this again is a third-person action RPG, and so you'll explore the mall, saving different survivors, taking out zombies, and encountering crazed psychopaths as you try and unravel the mystery of this outbreak. And so one of my favorite features of the game is the fact that you are going through this massive mall and you can basically pick up anything and everything and use it as a weapon. So you can do stuffed animals, swords you find along the way, golf clubs, baseball bats, lawnmowers, and much more. The gameplay is pretty brutal, but it's a lot of fun and really addicting. And so you'll have different missions that you'll try and accomplish throughout the game, but you're also fighting the clock at the same time. And so you're dropped off on top of the mall, and you have a limited amount of time to explore and unravel the mystery until you're picked up again at the end of the game. And so as you level up, you'll increase Frank's speed, you'll learn new abilities, and become more powerful, and you'll gain experience from killing zombies, saving survivors, and taking great pictures throughout these horrific events. It's one of my favorite zombie games of all time, and I definitely recommend it. Alright, the next game on the list is Slay the Spire. And so this is a deck building game, which is one of my favorite types of board games, but this time it's in video game fashion. And so there's a ton of roguelike elements to the game where you're trying to climb a spire and slay the monsters at the top. And there's 4 different character types you can choose from, each with their own unique skill sets and abilities. And so how the game works is you'll have a base deck of 10 cards to choose from that you can use to attack enemies, potentially heal yourself, defend yourself, and much more. And as you go through the different levels of the Spire, you'll unlock new cards, improving your deck as you go. And so you'll be trying to climb your way up the Spire as it gets progressively harder as you go. There's a ton of branching paths that you can choose from. So the gameplay is incredibly addicting. It stays fresh with those roguelike elements, and is definitely one of my favorite deck building video games out there. So if you haven't yet played Slay the Spire, I definitely recommend it. Alright, so the next game on the list is actually 2 games. It's Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and Dragon Quest Heroes 2. And so I combined these games into one. They are separate games, but they are very similar. And so I think if you like one, you're definitely going to like the other one. And they're both standalone games, so you could pick up either one really, or both if you like this type of game. And so the gameplay style is a hack and slash action RPG that is modeled after the Dynasty Warriors series, but this time set in the Dragon Quest universe. And so each game has their own unique story where you'll start off as more of a generic character with either a male or a female, and then along the way you'll recruit other classic characters from the Dragon Quest series and other Dragon Quest games into your party. And so there's definitely RPG elements to the game where you'll be able to power up your characters and have them learn different skills and get new weapons as you play throughout the game. And that gameplay is definitely really addicting. I enjoyed the Dynasty Warriors series when I first played them when they initially came out, but then kind of got tired of them. And these games really reinvigorated me to the series and this style of gameplay. So if you like Dragon Quest, if you like Dynasty Warriors hack and slash type gameplay, I recommend checking out one of these games, or both, if you like what you see. Alright, the next game on the list is Dragon Quest Builders 2. And so again, as it appears, this is the second installment in the Dragon Quest Builders series. And if you're not familiar with the series, it's kind of a combination of Minecraft and Dragon Quest. And so it takes a lot of the Minecraft elements like you're exploring and building and crafting, but then throws in the action RPG elements, classic monsters, and storyline elements of the Dragon Quest series. So Dragon Quest Builders 1 was definitely a great game and had a huge world to explore, but Dragon Quest Builders 2 took it to a whole new level. The world is incredibly massive, but also this time you don't necessarily go alone. You have a partner character that will help you explore. But on top of that, there's co-op opportunities as well, where you can play up to 4 players exploring and building creations throughout this world. I was pretty skeptical at first because I'm not the biggest Minecraft fan, but I think the combination of the Dragon Quest and the Minecraft, where you have that more robust action RPG elements, combined with the Minecraft building experience, makes this game incredibly addicting. And if you haven't yet checked out Dragon Quest Builders 2, I definitely recommend it. Alright, the last game on today's list is Blasphemous. So this game is a Souls-like Metroidvania. So it's pretty dark, it's pretty gothic, and incredibly challenging. And so it's an action platforming style game with a lot of those RPG Metroidvania style elements, but also is very similar to Dark Souls, where the difficulty level is incredibly tough, but once you master the system, it can become very addicting and very satisfying to play. It has those RPG elements and exploration elements, so you'll learn new abilities and power up your character as you go along, but you'll definitely need to master the skills of the game, similar to a Dark Souls type game, where dodging and parrying and attacking at the right time become incredibly important. So if you're looking for another great Metroidvania game, I definitely recommend checking out Blasphemous. Well, again guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video on 20 games worth buying in this new early Black Friday sale from GameStop. If you did, be sure to smash that like button. And if there's games I missed or other games that you think are great from this huge sale, let me know in the comments below. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notification to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.